says to me, "Not even you can screw this up tomorrow." That was not "Goodbye, Greg, good luck tomorrow." He says that comment. I go,
I would tell a guy, Jack Nicklaus instilled in me when I asked him some tips when I first got on tour. He said, "Mark, I hope you play great." I played with him in the last round at Doral in 1985 when I was lucky enough to win.
I hated him. That is what Mark McCumber said, and he meant it deeply. The guy on the left in that thumbnail had 4 specific golfers he could not stand. 4 men who violated everything he believed in. But this was not petty drama or personal vendetta. McCumber saw himself as a guardian of something sacred, a protector of the field, a sentinel standing watch over the rules of the game. He believed golf only worked if everyone played the same game by the same rules. His hatred came from something deeper than spite or envy, a commitment to integrity so fierce and so absolute that he would challenge the biggest names in the sport, on camera, during major tournaments, in front of millions. Because protecting the field mattered more than being liked, more than making friends, more than his own reputation and career. These 4 rivalries will show you exactly why he felt that way. And by the end, you might understand that his hatred was actually something else entirely. Have you ever thought about what makes someone care enough to be the bad guy in the story? If you like stories about golf's greatest feuds and the men who refuse to back down, hit the hype button right now. Give us some hype. Show us some love. These stories deserve to be heard, and with your support, we can keep bringing you the real drama and controversy behind professional golf. As McCumber moved to broadcasting, he noticed something troubling. Tiger Woods was changing the game, not just his talent or his wins, the energy. McCumber noticed Tiger brought an attitude different from Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer, an attitude like he was bigger than the game itself, like he could intimidate officials, like his brand mattered more than the rules. The modern superstar era brought intimidation that never existed before. The deference shown to Woods created an environment where players could influence governance, where the superstar felt untouchable. This lens explains McCumber's earlier battles. His feuds were about fighting disrespect for the rules, fighting gamesmanship, fighting players who thought they were bigger than the game. Now let's look at the 4 men who made Mark McCumber say, "I hated him." Number 1, Davis Love III. Davis was not a villain. He was not a bad guy. He was one of the most popular players on tour, a fan favorite, talented, well-liked, respected. But that is exactly why this moment matters. Because McCumber did not care who you were. During the 1994 Players' Championship at TPC Sawgrass, Love made a procedural mistake with a golf drop. He was being too casual, too loose, not following exact technical requirements of the rulebook. For McCumber, being popular meant nothing. Being talented meant nothing. Being loved by fans meant nothing. The drop was either right or it was wrong. There was no middle ground. There was no gray area. McCumber challenged him publicly. He said something that defined his entire philosophy forever. "I am not here to make friends. I am here to protect the field." That quote tells you everything about McCumber's worldview and his commitment. Every single player in that tournament had a responsibility to every other player, a duty to follow the rules exactly as written. Any deviation from the rules was disrespect to the field. This was not personal against Davis Love III. It was institutional. It was about maintaining order. It was about saying that nobody gets special treatment. Not the nice guys, not the fan favorites, not anyone. By 1994, McCumber was at his peak. He was the top American on the money list that year. He had won 10 tournaments on the PGA Tour, including the 1988 Players' Championship. He had influence on matters of governance and course design. When he challenged Davis, people listened. People knew this was not envy or conflict. This was a man protecting the integrity of the field. TPC Sawgrass was designed as a pure test of golf. It was sacred ground for McCumber. He had won there in 1988 with a score of 273. Then Davis matched that in 1992. Then Greg Norman shattered it with 264. So there was something about that year, scores dropping so low, and McCumber felt the rigor had to stay high to preserve tournament integrity. Love was caught in that moment, but he represented a principle McCumber would never compromise on. Number 2, Greg Norman. August 24th, 1995, Firestone Country Club. This was the most explosive conflict of McCumber's career. This was not just golf. This had politics underneath it, power dynamics, the future of professional golf at stake. Norman was watching from 12 to 15 feet away. He saw McCumber press down a spike mark in his line of putt. Pressing spike marks was strictly prohibited. It could give an unfair advantage. Norman claimed it was cheating. McCumber denied it. He said he removed a bug, just a small insect. Nothing intentional, but Norman was absolutely furious. He was the world's #1 player at that time, the Great White Shark. His anger was so intense that he said about the back nine that followed, "I could have bench pressed 500 pounds. I was that mad. Think about that. The rage was physical. The rage was overwhelming. Norman refused to sign McCumber's scorecard at the end of the round. In golf, that is the most formal accusation you can make. Refusing to sign a scorecard means you are calling the other player a cheater. It is the ultimate statement. It requires intervention from the very top. Tim Fincham, the PGA Tour commissioner, had to get involved. Norman's wife Laura had to calm him down. They had to prevent the world's #1 player from withdrawing from the tournament completely in protest. This was absolute chaos at the highest level of professional golf. But here's the key moment that changed everything. There was no official present when it happened. No observer. No referee. It was player against player. Word against word. Pure, he said. She said. The rules dictated that when you cannot prove something happened, when there is no definitive evidence, the benefit of the doubt goes to the player whose ball is in question. So McCumber was cleared officially, he won the dispute, he won the ruling, but Norman was convinced he was getting preferential treatment, insider treatment. And Norman believed there was more to it than just the incident on that green, much more. McCumber was a leading voice against Norman's proposed World Golf Tour, a rival circuit that Norman was trying to launch at the time against the PGA Tour. So Norman thought McCumber was an insider at the tour, someone who had institutional power and leverage, someone protecting his own position and his tour's interests by opposing Norman's new venture. McCumber believed Norman's accusation was payback, pure retaliation for his political opposition to the new tour idea. Underneath the spike mark story was a bigger conflict about power and control of the game itself. McCumber said something that year that captures his entire worldview. The rules are the brand. Players like Norman spent time talking about their brand, their image, their dominance, their legacy. But McCumber said the brand of golf itself was the rule book, not the players, not the celebrity. The rules. That is what made golf special. That is what made it different from other sports. If you let Norman play by different rules because he was #1, you destroyed the brand. You destroyed the game. McCumber could not allow that. He would not allow it. Norman won that tournament. McCumber shot 68 to Norman's 73 in that round, but the story ended in a confrontation that defined what professional golf was supposed to be. Number 3, Seve Ballesteros. This feud was completely different. This was cultural. Seve was the talisman of European golf, a master of escapology. He thrived in match play. He thrived in psychological warfare. He was brilliant but chaotic, a magician who could make shots from anywhere. But he also understood that golf was about controlling the opponent's mind. McCumber hated this approach. He believed professional golf should be a contest of skill, not a contest of who could annoy their opponent more. Save would cough during McCumber's backswing. He would clear his throat. He would jingle coins in his pocket. These were not accidents. These were deliberate tactics. McCumber labeled them Bush League. That was his exact word. Bush League. Unprofessional. Disrespectful. The psychology of match play was well known on the European tour. Gamesmanship was accepted there. It was part of the tradition. Players would do things to break their opponent's concentration. But McCumber argued that professional golf had a different standard, especially with television cameras watching, especially with the world looking on. You could not put the squeeze on your opponent with mind games. Not at that level. Not if you wanted to call yourself a gentleman of the game. In 1987, their friction was already evident. Seve played erratic golf that required multiple recoveries from rough. He had long delays. He demanded unusual rulings. For a player like McCumber, who valued pace of play and surgical precision, this was disruptive. This was chaos. It violated the quiet environment that McCumber believed golf required. But the real issue was deeply philosophical at its core. Sev saw the opponent as the target. You were supposed to put psychological pressure on the opponent. You were supposed to shake them emotionally. You were supposed to make them uncomfortable and less confident. McCumber saw the course and the rulebook as the target. You were supposed to manage yourself. You were supposed to play clean golf. You were supposed to let your skill and ability speak for itself. When Sev would put the squeeze on during a cold, windy day, he was doing it deliberately and with intention. His focus was on breaking his opponent's spirit and resolve. But McCumber viewed this as external interference in the game. The rules were meant to prevent this. The opponent is not the battlefield. The course is, the rulebook is. You do not win by annoying someone. You win by playing better golf. This represented a fundamental disagreement about what competition meant, what respect meant, what being a professional golfer meant. McCumber would never accept Sev's tactics, and Sev would never understand why McCumber was so rigid about it. It was a clash of cultures, old world American discipline versus European match play psychology, and it defined their entire relationship on the course. Number 4, Bernhard Langer, the 1991 Ryder Cup at Kiowa Island, South Carolina. The War by the Shore. This was the biggest stage of all. This was where McCumber's feuds went fully public and fully intense. The Ryder Cup had become a media spectacle by 1991. It was no longer gentlemanly. It was warfare, international warfare, between continents, between pride and national honor. McCumber had a significant dispute with Bernhard Langer, the respected German golfer. The issue was ball marking, the rules of ball marking. On the putting green, after you mark your ball, you have to put it back exactly where it was. Exactly. Not close, not approximately. Exactly. The rules are clear. McCumber accused Langer of not returning his ball to the exact spot where he had marked it. He said Langer was gaining a minute but significant advantage. He said it was gamesmanship that skirted the edges of legality. Langer was a meticulous player. He was slow. He scrutinized every variable, but McCumber interpreted this meticulousness as a cover for disrespect. McCumber said something that became famous. He said Langer was not a gentleman. He said Langer knows what he did. He moved that ball marker intentionally. He was trying to gain an advantage. This was not just a comment. This was an accusation. This was a public statement about another player's integrity, and it rippled through both teams. The tension nearly led to a physical altercation. Players were angry. The European team was offended. The American team was defensive. This was supposed to be a sporting event. Instead, it became a confrontation about honor, about whether you could trust the other player, about whether the rules were just words or if they meant something real. In a sport that prides itself on not having officials on the field, McCumber's public accusation was seen as a breach of the unwritten code. You were not supposed to call out another player publicly. You were supposed to handle disputes privately in the locker room. You were supposed to be gentlemen, but McCumber saw it differently. He believed the code of the rules superseded the code of the locker room. The rules came first. The integrity of the game came first. Millions of people were watching now. Millions of people around the world were paying attention. So the scrutiny had to increase too. You could not play fast and loose with the rules on a stage like that. You could not let people think golf was anything less than completely fair. This incident solidified McCumber's reputation as a policeman, a guy who would not let things slide, a guy who would challenge even the biggest names. Even Bernhard Langer, a great player, a respected player in his own right, had to answer to the rules the way McCumber saw them, and that changed the dynamics of the entire Ryder Cup. It showed that McCumber was serious, deadly serious. He was not playing politics. He was not protecting anybody. Why does all of this matter so much? Mark McCumber left a legacy extending far beyond his wins and losses on the course. His willingness to challenge the biggest players forced the PGA Tour to professionalize its officiating standards dramatically. After Norman, after Langer, the tour realized they could not have drama like that anymore. They could not have player versus player with no neutral observer. So they expanded the presence of rules officials. Now almost every group in a high-stakes tournament has an expert watching, making immediate calls. His opposition to Seve's tactics contributed to a broader shift in match play etiquette. Modern players are more aware of television cameras, more aware of social media consequences. They do not get away with Bush League behavior like McCumber complained about. Television created accountability. McCumber was an early voice for televised ethics. He understood that when millions of people were watching, the standards had to be higher. His course design work was an extension of the same philosophy. Over 50 courses, 30 that he designed personally. He worked with architects to create layouts that rewarded the right way of playing, accuracy, club selection, course management, not raw power. The courses reflected his beliefs, disciplined, strategic, uncompromising. McCumber stood at the gateway between two eras of golf, the gentleman's game of the past and the celebrity-driven industry of the future. His feuds were the friction points of that transition. Even though he made enemies, even though people called him a policeman and rules dictator, his influence on the game was profound and lasting through decades. He reminded everyone that the rules matter, that the field must be protected always, that you do not win by being bigger than the game. You win by respecting the game, by honoring the rulebook carefully, by understanding that golf only works if everyone plays the same game. That is the true brand. That is what Mark McCumber fought for his entire life. That is what his hatred was really about. Not petty spite, not personal grudges or vindication. A deep commitment to protecting something he believed in, like a sentinel guarding the field, like a guardian of the game itself. If you made it through this entire story, thanks for listening. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling us which feud shocked you the most. Hit that hype button one more time. Show us some support. Because stories like this need to be told. Stories about men who stood their ground firmly, who refused to compromise, who protected something bigger than themselves.